I'm deeply honored to have worn the cloth of this nation for 43 and a half years, and I'm humbled to have served as the 20th Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. But today is not about anyone up here on this stage. It's not about the President, the Secretary of Defense, me, CQ. It's not about us. It's about something much larger than all of us. It's about our democracy. It's about our republic. We are unique among the world's armies. We are unique among the world's militaries. We don't take an oath to a country. We don't take an oath to a tribe. We don't take an oath to a religion. We don't take an oath to a king or a queen or to a tyrant or a dictator.
The 20th Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, 43 and a half years in uniform, the highest-ranking military officer in the United States of America. He stood on a stage and said it out loud. We don't take an oath to a wannabe dictator.
We don't take an oath to a wannabe dictator. We don't take an oath to an individual. We take an oath to the Constitution, and we take an oath to the idea that is America, and we're willing to die to protect it.
Not in a book, not in a private conversation, not in an anonymous leak to a journalist, on stage, on camera, in his farewell address as the outgoing chairman of the Joint Chiefs, in front of the Secretary of Defense, in front of his fellow officers, in front of the world. We don't take an oath to a wannabe dictator. There is exactly one living person that statement was about, the same person Milley served under as the nation's top military officer, the same person who reportedly asked Milley why the U.S. military couldn't be more like Hitler's generals, the same person who Milley reportedly described privately as the most dangerous man in America, the same person who is now president again. General Mark Milley gave 43 and a half years to this country. He served in combat. He watched soldiers die. He sat in the Situation Room during some of the most consequential decisions in modern American history. And when he walked out the door for the last time, the thing he chose to say, the message he felt compelled to leave behind, was a warning, not a partisan attack, not a political speech, a warning about the oath, about what it means, about what it protects, about what it does not include. We don't take an oath to a king or queen or dictator. We don't take an oath to a wannabe dictator.
Those values and ideas are contained within the Constitution of the United States of America, which is the moral North Star for all of us who have the privilege of wearing the cloth of our nation. It is that document that all of us in uniform swear to protect and defend against all enemies.
We don't take an oath to an individual, he said, wannabe dictator, standing in uniform at his retirement ceremony. And the question that every American should be sitting with right now is, what does a man with 43 and a half years of service, who has seen every president from Reagan to Biden up close, have to have witnessed to walk out the door and say that? But before we go any further, real quick, let's be honest. You can't really trust mainstream media anymore. That's why we built Pump Politics, to bring you real stories, real context, and no corporate spin. If you want to stay ahead of the headlines, join our free newsletter. We'll send the news straight to your inbox every day. Just click the link in the description to join. And if you just want to support what we're doing, join us. Be part of the community that actually cares about the truth. All right, let's get back to the video. Let's establish who General Mark Milley is, because the weight of what he said on that stage is inseparable from who was saying it. Mark Milley served in the United States Army for 43 and a half years. He served in combat in Panama, in the Gulf War, in Afghanistan, in Iraq. He commanded soldiers in the field. He watched people die. He carried those deaths with him for the rest of his career in the way that combat commanders do. He was appointed chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff by Donald Trump in 2019. Trump chose him, confirmed by the Senate. The nation's highest-ranking military officer serving at the pleasure of the president who appointed him. What happened during those years in the most senior position in the American military is now partly a matter of public record, and partly documented in reporting that Milley has not disputed. Bob Woodward's reporting described Milley as so alarmed by Trump's behavior in the final months of his first term that he took steps to ensure that no nuclear launch order could be executed without his involvement. He reportedly called his Chinese counterpart twice during the transition period to assure him that the United States was not going to launch a surprise attack. He reportedly told staff that if Trump ordered illegal military action, they should refuse and come to him first. Those are extraordinary actions for a chairman of the Joint Chiefs. They are actions that reflect a judgment that the civilian commander-in-chief could not be trusted to operate within the bounds of the Constitution and American law. Milley has not denied them. Trump has called for him to be tried for treason for making those calls. And then Milley walked out the door and stood at a podium and said, "We don't take an oath to a wannabe dictator." He did not say it anonymously. He did not say it through a journalist. He said it himself, in public, on camera, in his own voice, at his own retirement ceremony, knowing exactly what he was doing and who he was talking about. That is a man with 43.5 years of service and nothing left to lose, making a deliberate choice to say the most important thing he knows while he still has the standing to say it. Let's go through the speech precisely, because every sentence was chosen and every word matters. He began by saying, "Today is not about anyone up here on this stage, not about the president, not about the Secretary of Defense, not about us. It is about something much larger than all of us. It is about our democracy. It is about our republic." That framing is deliberate. He is establishing from the first sentence that what he is about to say transcends the individuals present and speaks to the foundational questions of American governance. He is not giving a career retrospective. He is giving a warning, then the oath. We are unique among the world's armies. We are unique among the world's militaries. We don't take an oath to a country. We don't take an oath to a tribe. We don't take an oath to a religion. We don't take an oath to a king or queen or a dictator. Each of those alternatives is a thing that militaries in other countries, in other times, have sworn allegiance to. Each of them represents a form of loyalty that the American founding explicitly rejected. The framers knew what armies sworn to individuals did to republics. They designed the oath to the Constitution specifically to prevent it. And then, we don't take an oath to a wannabe dictator. That sentence does not appear in the standard recitation of alternative loyalties that militaries might have. It is not a historical reference. It is a present tense description of a specific person in a specific moment. Wannabe dictator is not a generic term. It is a characterization, made by the outgoing chairman of the Joint Chiefs, about the man he served under. We don't take an oath to an individual. And then, the most important line of the entire speech for understanding what Milley believes is at stake. Those who sacrificed themselves on the altar of freedom in the last 2.5 centuries of this country must not have done so in vain. Must not have done so in vain. That is not a nostalgic tribute to past sacrifice. That is a present tense warning that the sacrifices of 2.5 centuries of American soldiers are at risk of having been made for nothing if the constitutional order those soldiers died to protect is not defended now. Milley is saying the danger is real. The threat to what those soldiers died for is present. And the people in uniform have an obligation to that legacy that supersedes their obligation to any individual giving them orders. That is a remarkable thing for a chairman of the Joint Chiefs to say at his retirement ceremony. It is not a remarkable thing for a man who has apparently concluded that the constitutional order he swore to protect is under threat from the person who appointed him to the highest military position in the country. Let's talk about what General Milley witnessed during his time as chairman that produced this speech, because his words did not emerge from nowhere. They emerged from specific experiences with specific events that are now part of the documented record. June 1st, 2020, Lafayette Square. Milley walked with Trump through the square immediately after federal law enforcement cleared peaceful protesters with tear gas and rubber bullets so that Trump could hold a Bible in front of St. John's Church for a photograph. Milley appeared in the image in his combat fatigues. The backlash was immediate and severe. Milley subsequently issued a public apology, an extraordinary step for a sitting chairman of the Joint Chiefs, saying he should not have been there and that his presence created the impression that the military was being used for political purposes. That apology was itself a statement. A chairman of the Joint Chiefs does not publicly apologize for appearing in a photograph with the president he serves unless he has concluded that his presence conveyed something fundamentally wrong about the relationship between the military and political power. the final months of Trump's first term, the reports of Trump asking why American generals couldn't be like Hitler's generals, who he described as totally loyal to him. The reports of Trump suggesting that protesters should be shot. The reports of Milley telling senior staff that if they received an illegal order, they should come to him. The calls to his Chinese counterpart that Trump has called treason. January 6, 2021. The Capitol attack. Milley reportedly described it privately as a Reichstag moment, a reference to the 1933 burning of the German parliament building that Hitler used as a pretext to consolidate power and eliminate political opposition. A sitting chairman of the Joint Chiefs comparing what he witnessed on January 6th to one of the most significant events in the history of authoritarian takeover is not casual rhetoric. It is a professional military judgment about the nature of what happened. And then Trump returned to office, and Milley stood at a podium and said what he said. Wannabe dictator. Not as an insult, as a professional assessment from the man who spent 4 years in the room watching. Let's be precise about what this speech means and why it matters beyond the moment it was delivered. Point number 1. The outgoing chairman of the Joint Chiefs called the former and current president a wannabe dictator at his retirement ceremony, and that fact has not received anywhere near the attention it deserves. This is not a partisan politician. This is not a media commentator. This is a man who spent 43.5 years in uniform, who commanded soldiers in combat, who served as the nation's highest-ranking military officer, appointed by the man he is describing. When someone with that record and that standing uses those words in that setting, the default response should not be to normalize it or minimize it. It should be to ask what he saw that produced it. Milley chose his words carefully. Wannabe dictator is specific. It is not impulsive. It is not emotional. It is the considered judgment of a professional soldier with 4 years of direct access to the person he is describing, delivered at the moment of maximum credibility, when he has nothing left to gain and nothing left to lose. Point number 2. The oath Milley described is the foundational legal and moral framework that separates the American military from every authoritarian military in history, and Milley was explicitly saying that framework is under threat. The oath to the Constitution, rather than to an individual, is not a procedural formality. It is the thing that makes the American military a democratic institution rather than an instrument of personal power. Every authoritarian who has ever consolidated power has needed the military's loyalty to do it. The oath that Milley described is specifically designed to prevent that loyalty from being transferred from the Constitution to a person. When the chairman of the Joint Chiefs feels compelled to remind his officers of what the oath is and what it is not, at his retirement ceremony, in the specific language he chose, he is not reciting civics. He is responding to something he believes is actively threatening the meaning of that oath. Point number 3. Trump has called for Milley to be tried for treason, and the contrast between those two responses tells you everything about how each man understands the relationship between the military and democratic governance. Trump's response to Milley's calls to his Chinese counterpart was to say that in the old days Milley would have been executed for treason. That framing, that a military officer who takes steps to prevent an unauthorized nuclear launch and reassures an adversary that the civilian command structure has not broken down is committing treason, reflects a specific understanding of military loyalty. Loyalty to the commander, not to the Constitution. Loyalty to the individual, not to the law. Milley's speech reflects the opposite understanding. Loyalty to the Constitution. Loyalty to the oath. Willingness to die for the idea of America, rather than for the person temporarily occupying the White House. Those two understandings of what the military is and what it owes its commander are incompatible. And the fact that they were held simultaneously by the president and the chairman of the Joint Chiefs during the same 4 years explains a great deal about what happened during those years and what Milley chose to say on his way out. Point number 4. The millions who died for this country in 2.5 centuries of American wars did not die for a person. They died for the idea contained in the Constitution. Milley said their sacrifice must not have been in vain. That is a warning, not a tribute. Must not have been in vain. Present tense obligation, not past tense reflection. Milley is not looking backward at history when he says this. He is looking at the present and saying the threat to what those soldiers died for is real enough that it requires him to say this out loud at his retirement ceremony. 2.5 centuries of sacrifice, the Revolutionary War, the Civil War, 2 world wars, Korea, Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan, hundreds of thousands of Americans who died believing that what they were protecting was worth dying for. The idea that is America, the Constitution that is the moral North Star, the republic that belongs to its citizens and not to any individual who holds power within it. Milley said we must never turn our back on those who came before us, and we will never turn our back on the Constitution. He was talking to the officers in that room. He was talking to the soldiers who will serve in the years ahead. And he was talking to the American people watching. He was saying, pay attention. Something important is at stake, and the people who swore the oath understand it. So here is the bottom line. General Mark Milley, 43.5 years of service, the 20th chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the highest-ranking military officer in the United States, appointed by Donald Trump. He stood at a podium at his retirement ceremony and said, "We don't take an oath to a wannabe dictator." He said it in his own voice, on camera, in public, knowing exactly who he was talking about and knowing that everyone in the room and everyone watching knew exactly who he was talking about. He described the oath. To the Constitution, not to a country, not to a tribe, not to a religion, not to a king or queen or dictator, not to a wannabe dictator, not to an individual, to the Constitution, to the idea that is America, and willing to die to protect it. He said the millions who sacrificed themselves on the altar of freedom in 2.5 centuries of American wars must not have done so in vain. Must not. Present tense. A warning about what is happening now, not a eulogy for what happened before. Trump has called for Milley to be tried for treason, for making calls to reassure the Chinese military that the American command structure had not broken down, for telling his staff that illegal orders should not be followed, for doing the things that a chairman of the Joint Chiefs swearing an oath to the Constitution is supposed to do when he believes the constitutional order is under threat. One man sees loyalty to the Constitution as treason. The other man spent 43.5 years believing loyalty to the Constitution was the whole point. We don't take an oath to a wannabe dictator. Milley said it, on the way out, with nothing left to lose, after 4 years of watching from the room where the decisions were made. The American people should take that seriously, not because Milley is a perfect man or a perfect officer, but because men who have spent their entire lives in service to the idea of America and have nothing left to gain from saying what they see, tend to say what they see. He saw something. He said what it was. Stay with it. Because the question of whether the constitutional order that 2.5 centuries of Americans died to protect will survive the current moment is not a question that has been answered yet. And the people still in uniform, still swearing the oath that Milley described, are going to have to answer it.